I'm so glad to have Gary Bolles with me. I've known him for a couple of years now. He's taught me actually at SU, a Singularity University, and I was so fascinated with his experiences and what he does as consulting as well as advisor to a lot of firms and friends with a lot of accomplished leaders around the world. And he's traveled the world. I don't know how he travels so much still, but I already stayed fatigued traveling. So let's get this started. The topic is about being conscious. And, in the age of AI, I think humanity, as it is getting more anxious and Gen Zs are getting more mental health crisis is increasing. I thought it's my endeavor here is to really talk to leaders like Gary and get their wisdom, opinion, what they see and how they are seeing things as they travel and meet great leaders around the world. So Gary, thank you so much for taking the time.
No, absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation.
Take it over, and it'll be great to get your introduction and, share whatever your experiences to get the thing started, because I would love the audience to know who is Gary.
Yeah, sure. I have the benefit of having a small but mighty consulting firm called Charette, and we focus on a lot of what we call initiatives with impact, how we can help to move the needle on some of the challenges and opportunities of our time. And that's given me the opportunity to be able to work with amazing organizations like Singularity University. I've been their longtime chair for the future of work and now part of their fellowship program. I'm the fellow for transformation, personal, team, organizations, countries, what the process of transformation is. But I've got a very varied background, a child of Silicon Valley. I talked my way onto a software test team in 1983, so you can do the math. But then went on to wear about every hat you can wear in Silicon Valley, including entrepreneur. I was the editorial director of 5 different technology magazines, including Interactive Week, the internet's first newspaper in 1993. And now I have the tremendous opportunity to help people around the world, decision makers, especially in organizations, to understand some of the seismic changes that are affecting us and some of the strategies for being able to navigate uncertainty. And the typical topics are the future of work, the future of learning, and the future of leading. So hopefully that gives us a few places to jump off from.
Yeah, absolutely. And then because you have been a thought leader, we've been speaking about future of work for a long time, and you've written a great book on that, right? Especially in the age of AI, what do you think as human capabilities that will be important in a young 25-year-old? What are the capabilities do you think he or she should build to really be relevant in the future of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I want to say I have tremendous compassion for 3 groups of people. I really feel that in the age of AI, 3 groups that have been deeply affected are parents, teachers, but especially young people. And so I don't know what it's like to grow up with having this ubiquitous thing I call the digital distraction device, your cell phone, that has infused itself into so many parts of my life. I didn't grow up with that, but for youth who have and who are, I'm not a fan of the phrase digital natives, but people for whom technology really infuses an awful lot of their lives. What's happened is that the pace and scale of change have accelerated. Change is moving faster and faster. It's affecting more and more people, and that has direct impact on the lives of young people. So what's the kind of approach that we can suggest to help them? And I said, well, so that's what I call it 3 legs of the stool for continually navigating a world of exponential change is mindset, skill set, and tool set. So I always start with mindset. And what I show young people is an iceberg. I say, this is a good metaphor, but it's kind of like all of us are sort of similar to icebergs. There's a small percentage of awareness about ourselves, who we are, what we like, what we don't like, that's above the waterline. And there's a huge percentage that, especially for young people, we're not aware of. We don't know what our real skills are. We don't know the kinds of problems we really love to solve. We don't know the kinds of people that we'll like to work around. We're just learning a lot of those things. So the first takeaway is to really focus on mindset. Understand yourself, understand your own skills, take exercises, use tools that give you more information to look below the waterline. Because the better you know yourself, then the better you're able to direct yourself. Because the deliverable, what we want for every single young person is what I call agency. Agency is the ability to take a step, take some kind of action, and hope that there will be a positive outcome. And unfortunately, in an era where a lot of the messaging that young people are hearing from, especially Silicon Valley CEOs, that AI is going to take all their jobs and there's not going to be a future for them and they should just give up and have universal basic income, then what they do is they lose hope. So what I want to instead is to infect young people with the mindset that you can take action, you can have agency, and that in large part, what the value you'll create in the future will be because you were able to figure out how to have agency at a young age.
Great point, because I think what you talked about is the iceberg. The metaphor that you used was basically saying there's a lot more within you than what you notice on
Absolutely.
who you are.
Yeah.
In a sense, you're saying travel the journey inwards.
Right.
And when you discover yourself, you'll get a lot more things to transform your mindset. That and because in our ancient wisdom, it's the Oracle of Delphi said the most important thing for humanity is to know thyself. Yeah,
absolutely.
In the Hindu mythology, the Bhagavad Gita talks about consciousness as a wrapper around your mindset, intellect, and ego. So as intellect grows, mindset transforms, ego dissolves.
Yeah.
Right? Now, and most ancient wisdoms talk around those core foundations, right? You are born with a lot of impressions from previous generations, and the more you travel the journey inwards, the more you discover, and the more Now, having said that, you've been in the industry, like you said, for almost 5 decades, comes between that. 5 decades, and you've seen leadership 1.0, 2.0. Today we see, let's say call it 3.0.
Yeah.
In the new information age. And what is your take on how conscious the today's Fortune 100 founders, CEOs are versus 5 decades ago?
So I'll start first with Silicon Valley, just because I've known a number of the people who have led some of the companies of consequence and sort of seen that transformation, and then broadened to some of the other industries as well. So you're Fortune 500 CEO, you have a whole bunch of humans that work for you. You have value that you create for your shareholders. You're running a public company. And you're trying to balance a whole range of different pressures and dynamic tensions. If you look back to let's say, even as far as the 1960s, 1970s, what you often had was the responsibility to provide value to a range of stakeholders. It was not just your shareholders. You cared a lot about your employees. You cared a lot about your customers, your partners. You cared about the communities in which your organization operated. And of course, that's a generalization. There's lots of companies that had perhaps cared less about their employees than others. But for the most part, you didn't have this tremendous set of pressures from shareholders. Well, Mr. Milton Friedman came along with the whole idea that, no, that's the only stakeholder. And so what has happened in the succeeding 50 years is that a lot of the calibration of the attention of the CEO has shifted towards what can pump a stock price or make the company as valuable as possible. And what I try to argue in my book, the final chapter of my book, explores what I call the future we all want. I talk about the head of an organization, a large organization, and what really could be the deliverables. How could we go back to some of this mindset about a broader set of stakeholders? And what I suggest in a metaphor is, if you could have a conversation with each one of these stakeholders, well, first off, if you're making happy workers, happy humans inside your organization, it's much more likely they're going to be able to deliver value to the organization's the other stakeholders, including shareholders, and especially if they know what the purpose of the organization is. CEOs ask me all the time, why do young people nowadays ask me about the purpose of an organization? I never asked about purpose. And it's because I think young people here have flipped the stack as to why we work. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about that model. But if you made happy workers and they were constantly delivering value to your customers and other stakeholders, if you made happy partners, happy communities in which you operate, a happy planet in which we all live, then it's pretty likely that your shareholders are going to be quite happy as well. And so this is a mindset shift. This is what I encourage people who lead organizations to do, is to think differently about that purpose. And then your conversation, your relationship with your board is about getting in synchrony, having alignment around what those priorities are, and then the metrics that you follow to be able to deliver on them. And in the age of AI, that's going to become increasingly critical, because you're going to have the ability to automate a whole bunch of tasks so much more rapidly than you did before. And if you don't have some kind of cosmology, some kind of anchoring, a conscious approach to how you want humans in your organization to be able to thrive, then you're actually going to see the decay of what's often called performance, which I call effectiveness, and the ability of the organization to deliver value to its stakeholders is going to decay.
You bring up a great point, Gary, because in the last century, the capitalistic world and economies has sold a story, I believe, of outer growth is equal success.
Yeah.
And, right from as we transition from agriculture age to industrial age, in last 20, 25 years, companies have become trillion-dollar companies because of the intelligence age or information age, so to say. What's the next age? And, if I'm a 20, 25-year-old trying to find start a company, what are the characteristics? Should I continue to be dependent on intelligence and information as to build a company, or is there something else that you think is going to become important because the story of outer growth and numbers, is that still relevant? So what is your take on it, and what should the youngsters be investing in?
So again, I have tremendous compassion for young people, and I actually was trained as a career counselor, believe it or not, when I was 19 years old. So I've done a lot of coaching, but I don't give advice as in to say, if you do these three things, you're going to be successful. So instead, it's much more, what's the mindset you need to develop? And knowing more and more about your own mindset is wonderful. What's the skill set you need to develop, and what's the tool set you need to leverage? So the mindset has to be one of agency. The skill set, I say, okay, so you have a portfolio of skills, and a lot of those skills are below the waterline. You don't really see them. We don't have a Fitbit for skills. So you have to have a process of continually inventorying your own skills, understanding what you're good at, understanding what you love doing, because I call those superpowers, the intersection of what you love doing, what you're good at. And you have to have some North Star or Southern Cross that pulls you forward. There's some purpose in your life or some place that you want to use those skills that you want to continually either find or create. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, if you have strong entrepreneurial tendencies, you can create the organization, but you have to fall in love with the problem. So here's the skill set I would recommend. And in English, it's an acronym called PACE. Problem solvers who are adaptive, creative, and with empathy. So what do I mean by each of those? Problem solver, because this is what we do as humans. We solve problems. We're general purpose problem solvers. There's a lot of things you can do to train a software and agents to be able to perform tasks and to solve certain parts of problems, but they have to be trained to solve the new ones or the next ones, at least with the current iteration of the technologies. But humans are general purpose problem solvers. My father, who wrote a book called What Color Is Your Parachute, the world's job hunting guide, he said, if you position yourself as a problem solver to an employer, I understand your problems as an organization. I understand your customers' problems. I have solved problems like those before. You are far more likely to get hired than the next person. So problem solvers who are adaptive, being adaptive is a skill set. Knowing how, it's a mindset as well. Knowing how you can continually adapt, continually face the problems you've never seen before and solve those problems. Continually work with people that you've never worked with before. And I've got some great stories about examples for that. Third skill is being creative. So a lot of generative AI technologies can create or go through the process of creating images, text, video, but it's the human who is the creator. We are the creatives, and we are the ones that are directing the tools. So the more we can use our creative problem solving as humans, again, we're general purpose problem solvers, that's a superpower. And then finally, the E is with empathy. So Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he says he thinks that empathy is the number one human superpower. It's our ability to empathize with the person in the cubicle next door or on the Zoom call, with our customer, with our communities, with the planet. That is that North Star or Southern Cross that can pull us forward. So problem solvers who are adaptive, creative, and with empathy. Now, what does an entrepreneur do? They fall in love, that's empathy, with the problem of a customer, and they continually adapt using creative problem solving until they have their MVP or minimum viable product. So entrepreneurs use that PACE skill set automatically. They don't necessarily get trained to use that skill set, but that is what is rewarded for an entrepreneur when they go to build a company of substance.
Right. That was so well said. I've never heard that before, but it's so simple, but so powerful. Now, having said that, I also know you teach a lot, both on leadership and organization build up, structuring, and so on and so forth. Now, do you think that the education system, which is designed fundamentally to make most smart, most intelligent people rise to the top, is aligning to the new age skills that you just talked about required? Is the education system adopting it first, or it's not? What should it do?
So the short answer is most education systems are not necessarily adapting rapidly. There are wonderful examples, poster children around the world, of specific educators and schools, universities that are doing phenomenal. And there are some countries that, have great approaches to building the connective tissue that is needed to continually adapt. But let me give sort of the basic setting for this, because I do spend quite a bit of time with college presidents and educators around the world. And remember that I said tremendous empathy for teachers and educators in the age of AI. So the majority of the models that we follow today were created during the industrial era. The U.S. educational system, especially the K-12 system, was very influential. And 100 years ago, there were many theorists who were talking about the need in the industrial era to model schools on production methodology. So, and you've seen this yourself. One teacher, they supposedly have all the knowledge in their heads, a whole bunch of students, 30, 60, 70 students, that they impart the knowledge to. And my friend Esther Wojcicki wrote a book called Moonshots in Education. And she says, Moonshots in Education, wonderful book. And Esther calls that the sage on the stage. And she says, no, we need to leave that behind. We need to change that role of the person who enables learning to the guide on the side. The sage on the stage thinks that they have all the answers. The guide on the side has all the best questions. And Esther has tremendous examples because she taught for decades at Palo Alto High School in Silicon Valley, right across from Stanford. And she taught her students how to think. And she had up to 70 students in her classes because they all taught each other how to be able to do the world-class newspapers and magazines that her classes cranked out. And so this is an opportunity to rethink just what the core of education is and what the institutions can become. Because if we think about it, what are we really trying to do? We're not trying to have these arbitrary stage gates that we call pre-K, K-12, depending upon your country, and higher education and then adult education. Those are just arbitrary boxes that we've placed around this period of learning, this process of learning. Learning has to become lifelong. One of my father's great books was called The Three Boxes of Life: Education, Work, and Leisure, and how education needed to become lifelong. Book he wrote in 1976. But if we do that, what are we really trying to prepare people for? We know that people are going to go through predictable phases of their lives. That is, they're going to grow their bodies, their minds, their souls, hopefully their level of consciousness. So those are predictable. We're all going to go through those phases. We know that there are certain roles we will have in life. We'll be So hopefully we're going to be the children of somebody. Then we have potentially siblings. We're going to be students. Eventually we're going to be workers. We might be parents. We might have families. We might be spouses. So we know those roles are predictable, and we know that the goals of life are predictable. Most people are going to want to be able to find or create meaningful, well-paid work. Most people are going to want to have great groups of friends. Most people are going to feel that they can contribute in some way to their communities. So if we understand that every single human has predictable phases of their lives, goals in their lives, and roles in their lives, now we can design an education. Now we can design systems to help people prepare for all of those very, very predictable outcomes. And then if we say, yeah, okay, it's fine, we can still have grades and, have cohorts of people learn and that sort of thing, that's great. But there are plenty of countries, if you look at the education system of Finland, early on, it's all about play-based learning, and they don't really start to buckle down to learning specific learnings around math or a language until they're 6 or 7 or even later years. If you look at the system of Singapore, which has built strong relationships between employers and their colleges, where the employers are defining the skills that they will hire for, and then the colleges are training specifically for those skills, you see the ecosystem, you see the infrastructure of building tomorrow's education systems that are anchored in the needs of helping humans to be able to develop, but also preparing them for a constantly changing world of work.
You touched upon a very, very, very important topic, which is understanding the life has 4 phases. And you kind of brought it up, and a lot of our ancient wisdom talks about the first phase of life it talks about is the student life for the first 25 years. That prepares, schools has to prepare them, and it used to be happening about 300, 400 years ago, that they used to call, in ancient wisdom, they used to be called gurukuls, where it's a one-to-one, where the teacher used to understand the student and prepare the student so that by the time they go to the householder stage, from like student stage to householder, from 25 to 50, and from 50 they get into retirement stage. And those days, which is, how do you not continue to pursue when the kids have gone into colleges and they've got their own jobs? Now, how do you go back, rediscovering yourself and start subtracting, no more in the addition mode, right? And the last phase from 75 to 100 was defined as renunciation phase, where you're comfortable saying that you're a tenant in the body, and the body is not permanent. So you're constantly, preparing yourself to renounce the habit. So this was there in a lot of our ancient wisdom. Do you think it's time for, and I think you brought that out in your modern definition, but given that, especially given that AI is getting, is disrupting or, getting innovated faster than human wisdom, do you think it's time for human to understand the consciousness and evolve consciously? And, how do you make it for a common person understand the power of, being conscious?
So I think that what resonates, I think, with so many people when we look at ancient wisdom from a range of different sources is that without the distractions or the influence of technologies, we had the opportunities as humans to go through a process of discernment. So the mindset of discernment says that there are truths in the world, says that there are truths about yourself to be discovered or to be developed or co-created. But the basic premise is there's a lot to learn. So a lot to learn about yourself, especially for what's below the waterline of the iceberg. But what I think has happened in different eras of humanity is some aspects of it have been easier and some have been harder. So if you look centuries ago, millennia ago, for many, life was very, very hard. And just being able to feed your family and put a roof over their heads, that was it. Like that was purpose. That was meaning in your life. And then what happened, what developed in a lot of different cultures, especially in the interface to the world of work, was proficiency. You could develop a trade, or you could learn that you had a certain skill set. Ah, okay, so that discernment is the intersection of you and how you might be able to create things of value in the world and be compensated for them. And then my father came along 50 years ago with his book, and he said, listen, I'm going to sort of go back to some of this old thing. He actually was a recovering Episcopalian priest, so well-versed in the Christian ethos. And he said, what if you could do things that you loved or that motivated you? There was something deep inside of you, something that you could be conscious of that really pulled you forward or that really resonated with you. And that might be just the people you like to work with. And then what ended up happening for many is then in that later phase when you're talking about there's the realization that your body has only a temporal presence on the planet. Maybe you would realize, oh, I need to give back. I need to do something for the world. Well, these 4 elements of doing something that you can be compensated for, feed your family and put a roof over their heads, be good at it, have some love for it, and then potentially do something that the world needs. This is known as ikigai. And in Japan, and especially in Okinawa, it's practiced by some of the longest lived people in the world. And the belief with the ethos of ikigai is that a life is not well lived without all 4 of these things. So I'm not telling you have to go out and practice ikigai, but what resonates with me and what I talk to many audiences, I say, well, what's happened for young people in the age of AI is that they have flipped the stack. So I show in my book, I show this as a ladder. What you can get paid for, what you're good at, what you love, and what the world needs. And many people stop at rung number 2. But young people have flipped the stack. They say first, what does the world need? If I can do that, then I'm going to love it. If I love it, I'm going to get good at it. If I get good at it, then I'm going to be paid well for it. This is the answer when parents ask me all the time, why won't my kid get a real job? Or when those CEOs ask me about the purpose of my company, this is my answer. I say that young people today have a completely different framing for how they are approaching their lives, the world of work. And we're in an era where they need to be more conscious, and I hope also conscientious. What that means is exactly the same things that you and I have been talking about. They need to know themselves better. There needs to be a process of self-discernment. But then they also need to understand the kinds of problems or things in the world that they're passionate about wanting to be able to focus on. So we have to be more intentional. This is what I believe consciousness is in the age of AI, is greater intentionality. And that's true for each of us as individuals, but it's also true for those who lead, whether you lead a team, an organization, a country. We must be far more intentional people who lead. We need a different cosmology for the ways that we judge ourselves, because I think that is flipping as well.
Fabulous. I mean, you brought up a very important topic, right? Which is correlating to what a new interest that I'm seeing people have is longevity. Longevity is the new big thing, and then Ikigai has always promoted that in the blue zones, the lifespan increases and the happiness quotient is higher. People who live in blue zone, which is what Ikigai talks about. Maybe this is such an important topic that the way you simplified Ikigai and the way you kind of slipped how young. So you are basically saying the youth of the world is thinking in the right way, and as elders, as parents, maybe there is something to learn that it's going full circle, where post-industrial, post-information, youngsters are trying to find the purpose of the problem they want to solve before the money. And you also, hierarchy of needs also you drew up earlier on. So it's you're connecting the dots beautifully, and you're saying, and that's probably why longevity has got such a big momentum today. So maybe connect the dot, because I know you are also closely associated with Peter at SU, and maybe give me some thought. What are some of these leaders thinking about?
Yeah. So I want to tease out a couple of things there, because when we talk about longevity, it's all about motivation, and so there's a long tradition in different cultures about the role of ego and our beliefs about our role, why we're here on the planet. So there's a lot of discussion about purpose, and just because I've had the opportunity to be able to help a wide variety of decision makers with the process of understanding purpose, I say, okay, so there's purpose with a capital P. That's why you're here on the planet. But that's a little scary for some people. So then some say, oh no, I want it to be a little p. Like, what's my purpose in my work or something like that? Oh, that's scary for some people. So that is meaning. So what gives me meaning in my life? And so I say, okay, so what's the role of the ego when we talk about longevity? Is that because you think your capital P, the big purpose that you're here, is that you're supposed to be around longer? You're supposed to be doing more things. So I think that comes with responsibility. If that's your cosmology, if that's what you believe, that you should be on the planet for longer, then I think the table stakes went up. I think your requirement, your responsibility for doing more to have an impact, more to be able to contribute to the planet, to people, the greater the responsibility is, the longer you're around. And so I want to separate out where some in Silicon Valley, I won't name any names, are very ego-driven because they just think, hey, I should just be around longer. That's it. I get to. I've got the money. I want to be. I'm gonna to do all the dietary things, all the things that try to just stretch out my time on the planet. And I'd say, okay, I kind of get that. I'd really like to talk to the people who see it as an opportunity to be able to do more, to be able to contribute more, to want to be around longer, hopefully not just lifespan, but health span, to be healthy in our later years and be around longer because they believe that their window for contribution to the world will increase.
Good. I mean, I've seen you are quite healthy. You travel the world. I don't want to ask your age. You're 50 years in the industry, so people can get.
Yeah, you can do the numbers.
So what's your morning ritual?
Oh, that's funny. So first off, I'm a night owl. So I think, one of the things you sort of get over time is you sort of figure out what your optimal windows are. I'm a night owl, and I especially love writing late at night. So if I can write until 1 or 2 a.m., I'm a very happy camper. My wife rises fairly early, like quite early. So in the morning, I often try to rise with her, or, fairly soon after she's up. So we have the time together. And then I will do a lot of reading from early on while I'm consuming, pretty much the same breakfast every morning. But that's only when I'm home, because as you say, I do travel quite a bit. And so the answer is, on the road, zero routine. Like, there's none. It's always based on where I am, the culture that I'm in, the people that I'm around. And that is one of the things that keeps me young, is to continually have that opportunity where there are no routines when I'm on the road. But what I find is that the way I like to start off the day is that I'm simply a voracious reader and a voracious consumer of insights and information. And I'm curious about everything. Everything fascinates me. There are very few headlines or stories that I see that I don't want to explore more. And I just have to be pretty good about prioritizing to be able to choose the things that I really dive into, because if I could clone myself, every single one of the clones would be reading and talking to people constantly to be able to continue to learn.
Wow. So kind of what habit that you saw that changed one habit that changed your life?
I think it's probably that I found the process, and this may sound a little orthogonal, the process of having the opportunity to continually do talks and conversations and consulting with such a wide variety of people. Every time I am learning, I'm trying to think of whether or not that learning could be useful to somebody in another context. And so that process of continually, maybe I've been my own LLM for years and I didn't know. Constantly getting new training of the model in my head, and then seeing where that fits and the ways that it might be able to catalyze learnings for others. That is a rinse and repeat process for me. And I found that it's often the most random inputs. It's often the learnings from farther and farther out on the edges that bring it back to these core insights. But then, because I do between 100 and 150 talks and interviews like this in a year, I am continually being put to the test for different audiences. And, young people, I'm known around the world as Uncle G. If you're under 25, that's what you call me. If you're over 25, it's often Professor Gary. But I talk to young people, I talk to CEOs, I talk to boards of directors, I spend time in communities because I have to continually adapt the cosmology to what I believe will be the most helpful ways for them to learn. That is one of the greatest opportunities you could possibly have if you want to be able to be continually curious and continually learning yourself.
That's great. That's great. Wow. So having said that, since you read so much, what are the top 3 books that top of your mind that the next generation should?
Okay. So I always have, I am horrible at finishing books. I just have to tell you, because as I said, I have an adult, what I know is an undiagnosed advanced case of adult attention deficit, because I will continually get pulled in the next shiny object. But I'll give you a couple of examples that I think can be really useful to people. So the first is any book that helps you to learn more about yourself. Now, I know in a short attention span theater era, it's very, very hard to dive in and really get through something. But one of the superpowers that young people must develop is the ability to dive in on something. And so anything that helps you to learn that and to learn more about yourself, I strongly recommend. Anytime you can read a book to the end and really dive in on it. But one of the books that I'd recommend, and it's a little self-serving because my father wrote it, but is this book, What Color Is Your Parachute? And we actually have an online course of it that, we're always willing to give people access to. But it's self-knowledge. It's exercises to learn more and more about you. So that's the first one that I recommend. The second is any book that helps you to develop your own theory of what it is that you feel you need to do in the world. Now, some people, believe it or not, will read books like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and they will get these light bulbs about how they should be interacting in the world and interacting with other people. But whatever you can do that can get you more of a sense of what your own mindset and skill set can be, but how you can be able to continually have an impact in the world. And then the third is anything that helps you to understand system. So one of the superpowers that's going to be really critical is to just understand the systems that we all operate within. You were talking, for instance, about the peculiar form of capitalism that we all follow. Anything that helps you to understand those systems or those processes. And so to some people, the processes might be Eric Ries's Lean Startup book. It might be, okay, I get that. I want a cosmology, a process for how I go through, and I determine a problem that I want to solve, and I want to be able to solve that entrepreneurially. For others, it might be that you do want to understand our peculiar forms of capitalism that we practice around the world and how you can hack those systems. So whatever helps you to be able to be a better systems thinker is a critical deliverable in this era, because then when you see new problems, you will have a far better preparation to deconstruct the problem and understand what the potential solutions might be. Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, my company, we did projects with Google for over 9 years, actually over a dozen years, consulting projects. But Eric would often stop his team, people were coming to pitch him on products. And he would stop them in mid-sentence and he would say, I don't think you understand the problem that you are trying to solve. And he would send them back to the drawing board. So the more you can understand how you solve problems and how systems work so that you can deconstruct them to be able to develop breakthrough solutions, then the more prepared you're going to be to encounter problems that you've never seen before.
Very well said. Yes. Now, you've seen so many CEOs, you've interacted with so many leaders. One skill every CEO or a leader should learn.
So I talk a lot about the role of people who lead. And you might have noticed that throughout this entire discussion, I've never used the word leader. And it's because I think we have a leadership industrial complex. We have literally thousands of books on leadership every year. Why? I mean, there's been books going back decades and decades on leadership. Why haven't we cracked this code? And the answer is, well, it's hard. It's very hard to lead. And so we keep on having new models, new approaches. And so, well, okay, so I'm not going to use the word leader because I think it's lost its meaning in many contexts. I talk about leading as a verb, and anybody can lead. So think of that person who was the leader in the organization, and you can plug in the word manager or supervisor or executive, but think of the person who was the leader, the traditional leader. It kind of sounds a lot like what Esther Wojcicki talks about in Moonshots in Education. They thought they were the sage on the stage. They thought they had all the answers. They felt that was the pressure to have all the answers. I say, well, let's take exactly that same mindset and let's throw away the label of leader and let's call them a guide. Let's call them the team guide. So the way that leader of the past judged themselves was often by how many problems they solved in a day. They had all the answers. I believe the way the people who lead in the future will judge themselves is by how many problems never reached their desk because they empowered others to solve them. So think of leading as a verb, as a mindset and a skill set, empowered by this new AI tool set in many ways, but how you can inspire others to lead as well. And there's great examples of organizations that do this. My longtime client, Novartis, the pharma company, they have a practice called unbossing. You walk into a meeting, and the person with the highest title in the room is supposed to look around and say, how can we unboss this meeting? And what that means is, how can I not be the one who comes up with the answer? You all need to come up with the answer. And then I am here to help with tie breaks if that's necessary, but I'm here to find you resources and remove roadblocks so you can continually lead. Got it.
Now, I'm not going to use the word leader into
Sorry. No, I'm not trying to be the word police. Go ahead. You can use it. Yeah.
For now, you future of work is you are totally in that space. And what should youngsters be ready with to make it relevant for the future of work as a worker? Forget about everybody wanting to be a CEO or a founder.
Yes.
Preparing themselves for the workplace for next 10 years.
Yeah. So there is think of it as a range of possibilities. And what I talk about, the metaphor or mental image that I'm trying to suggest that young people especially adopt is, in the past, we used to talk about a career ladder. And what you'd be thinking about for the next 10 years is, how do I get on the bottom rung of the ladder and work my way up? And maybe there are some young people that are willing to wait 10 years to become a supervisor on a team, but I don't know many of them. They're very impatient nowadays. So the next metaphor was actually championed by Sheryl Sandberg when she was at Facebook. But she said, oh, no, it says jungle gym, like a kid's play structure where you're jumping around and moving sideways. She said, no, I don't think those are useful anymore. Think of it as a trail map. Think of the steps that you might do in the next 10 years as a trail map. And so you're at the beginning of a trail, and it's a journey, and you don't know, you can't see the future. Future you will know, that version of you that will be down the road in 10 years or 20 years will know looking back, but you can't know looking forward. So instead, if you think of it as a range of possibilities, you think of it as a range of trails that you might follow, what would be the decisions as to why you would take a particular trail? Now, some people are going to believe that they should do it because of where they can make the most money. And if you're going to do that, then look for the signals where it's the combination of the kinds of training you can get that can be the most lucrative. And then if you want it to be where it could be a role you could have for a longer period of time, in the U.S., you would be considering the trades. You would be looking at becoming a welder or in construction or other jobs that are very likely to be around for a long period of time. You'd be looking at healthcare, where you know that there's going to be all this demand for healthcare workers and there won't ever be enough supply. So that's one path you could follow. That's one trail on the map that you could follow. Another could be, no, I want to just learn by doing. I want to make a bunch of mistakes. I want to do a bunch of projects. And then in that case, what I would suggest you constantly look for is, what can you be passionate about to want to learn more about now? And how can you get the most real-world experience as rapidly as you possibly can? Because this is what employers are going to be asking for. They're going to ask you, how have you solved this kind of problem before and in what context? So the more you do projects, paid, unpaid, whatever you can do to learn the skill set developed in particular arenas to be able to point to projects where you have solved problems. That's a critical one. You know that employers in many cases are going to be asking for some level of AI capacity. That is, you at least know how to use the basic tools. You've applied them to problem solving in different contexts. And that's sort of a baseline for a lot of different organizations. And then the third thing that they're going to the four by now is your ability to collaborate. So you have to be able to function as a team. So what used to be encouraged when you would write a resume, which, is a tool that I think has gone the way of the dodo, but it was to talk about all of your accomplishments in a vacuum. Whenever you function as part of a team, the more you can articulate what your role of the team was and how you enabled the interaction with other team members to empower them as well, that is going to be a superpower that employers are going to demand, because what they're going to want is you're going to get thrown into a situation where you're going to be working with people you've never met before. You're suddenly going to have to solve a problem, and you're going to have to do it very effectively. I used to help to produce events for the TED conferences, and I did one in New York called TED at Allianz. I was the onstage host, and I had a jazz quartet do a series of riffs. And then I went up to the leader afterwards, and I said, God, that was amazing. You guys, that was wonderful. How long have you guys known each other? And he said, we just met. They'd never played together before, but they knew how to come together, build something of substance and value together, and create an experience for others. And that is increasingly what employers are going to ask young people to do as well.
Very well said, Gary. Because what you're saying in essence is that as robotics take over your muscles, strength, as AI takes over your mind and intelligence, what is required with all of us youngsters who are going to work, employers are going to look for collaborators, integrators, creators, rather than just innovators all the time.
So think of it as that employers will need a portfolio of skills. And you're exactly right, is there will be those that they need to catalyze new innovations, come up with new ideas, develop new products and services, and awesome. And I think a wide variety of people have that capacity or could be helped to develop that capacity. But they're going to need a range of different skill sets and mindsets as well. You're going to need people that are great at problem solving, and people that are great at catalyzing, people that are great at leading, people that are great at helping to make change, transform, to catalyze change. And all of those, for the people who lead in the future, all of those, their job will be to ensure that all of those people can be made successful as you're continually building this, what I call flow of human capital.
And in continuation to that, what you're doing right now at Singularity, you're leading this effort from what I remember called Possible Futures.
Oh, so I do host a podcast, and it's right now we've just interviewed my fellow fellows, but the whole idea around possible futures that you know quite well from the whole Singularity University ethos is foresight practices. It's foresight thinking. We think in terms of the red threads that are influencing our world, and we know exponential technologies, we know macroeconomic conditions, we know geopolitical conditions, we know changing consumer and customer demand. We know all those red threads are weaving together to evaporate old opportunity, but to create new opportunity. And we know that there are scenarios we can envision for what the intersections of those threads are. And the most inspirational person to talk about this is Ray Kurzweil, another co-founder of Singularity University, who plotted, for instance, the microprocessor, storage, communications technologies, and said, listen, we're going to have this capacity right around now to be able to have these leaps forward with this thing we now call AI. But he was able to predict this almost 40 years ago. And so the more that we use foresight thinking to envision possible futures, but then we have to have that North Star or that Southern Cross that pulls us forward so that we co-create the future that we all want.
Fantastic. So that's one way to know or listen to you through your podcast. How else the youngsters whom you have inspired can engage with you or watch you or read about you? How should they follow you?
So I'm pretty easy to Google. I don't think you can find me looking for Uncle G, but certainly G Bolles, Gbolles, of anything. There's a lot of videos online. I mentioned this course that we have through What Colors Your Parachute. I also have about 2 million learners on LinkedIn. So, and this is one of the places I would strongly recommend young people to be thinking about, because what I try to encourage is this whole framing of mindset, skill set, and tool set applied in your life. So the most popular course is called Learning Mindset in the Age of AI, because becoming a lifelong learner starts as a mindset. And you can leverage these tools to be a better lifelong learner, but you need to be able to develop that as a mindset. And then I have another course that's a complement to it that is called Learning Agility in the Age of AI. Remember, the second skill of a pace is adaptive. Learning agility is how to apply that mindset and develop the skill set of lifelong learning. So, and these courses are translated in a wide variety of different languages, and they're in many what are called learning paths, the kinds of certificates that you can get that can help you, for instance, with AI skills.
Fantastic. I mean, for over half a century, you've touched so many people, you've impacted so many lives. So how do you define your life's mission at this stage?
The need to do more. So I'll never have enough time on the planet, and I'll never reach enough audiences, and especially young audiences. But as far as I'm concerned, this is what life is all about. Life is about connections. It's about relationships. It's about people. It's about helping communities. It's about helping people to be able to envision and achieve a better life. And I don't think there's I haven't had a real job in over 20 years, but I don't think there's a better job that I could envision is to be able to have the opportunity to meet so many amazing people and to try to help inspire them to do what's next.
Well, as we come to the end of it, you give us so many golden nuggets today. I think we could go on and on. I mean, I can put a straw in your brain that's to it'll overflow. So I think it's been phenomenal. And as we come to the end, if you were to complete a sentence, the future belongs to those who.
There's so many different ways I want to answer this, but I'm going to actually jump off from your framing, which is who are dedicated to the development of greater consciousness. So consciousness and awareness, intentionality, having that North Star or Southern Cross, I group all of those under the banner of increasing consciousness. And the more dedicated to developing your own and helping others to be more conscious and conscientious in the age of AI, as far as I'm concerned, that's our group delivered.
Gary Bolles, what a phenomenal talk. This was so amazing. And what better way to end by you saying it belongs to people who are developing greater consciousness on a podcast that's all about being conscious. Thank you so much, Gary.
Oh, thank you so much. Great conversation.
So,
be well.
Yes, thank you.